The moment the card slipped from her bag, my heart stopped. I was walking beside her, as we always did, enjoying the calm of our Saturday afternoon. The sunlight streamed through the trees, dappling the sidewalk, but everything around me turned to static, and the world felt distant, as if it wasn't real. She bent down to pick it up, but I froze, unable to move, unable to breathe. The front of the card was unmistakable, a deep red, with embossed gold lettering that read, "To my love." My fingers tightened around the strap of my bag, my throat constricting as the weight of the moment hit me all at once. She smiled, absent-mindedly brushing her fingers over the card's design, clearly not aware of the impact it had on me. When she handed it to me, I didn't take it at first. I was still processing the image in my mind, the unmistakable romantic design, the kind of anniversary card that seemed so personal, so intimate. I couldn't place where it had come from, but the weight of it was palpable. There was something about it. Something that told me this wasn't just any card. "Here," she said, holding it out to me with a smile. I must have dropped it. "Who's it for?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Even I could hear the edge of uncertainty in it. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to hear the answer. But the question slipped from my lips like it had been rehearsed. Her eyes flickered for just a second, but it was enough. It was the smallest hesitation, but it was enough. She glanced down at the card, almost as if she hadn't realized what she had just handed me. "It's just a card I was looking at in the store," she replied, with a casual shrug, but her voice lacked the usual confidence. "I thought it was pretty. But I couldn't shake it. I couldn't let go of the feeling that something was off." She had never talked like that before. She had never casually picked up a romantic card for no reason. The way she had hesitated. The way her smile didn't reach her eyes. I couldn't stop the thoughts from rushing in. Why was she carrying it? Why did she drop it? I swallowed hard, trying to suppress the growing pit in my stomach. "You sure?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. She gave me another quick, practiced smile. "Yeah. I don't even know why I still have it. Just one of those things I pick up and forget about." But I wasn't convinced. Something was wrong, and I could feel it deep in my chest. Every fiber of my being was screaming at me, telling me that I needed to look closer, to ask more, but the words caught in my throat. I didn't want to pry. I didn't want to sound paranoid or intrusive, but the air between us felt different now. It felt like something had shifted. It felt like there was a secret hanging in the space between her and me, and I had no idea what it was. For the rest of the walk, I kept glancing over at her, watching the way her hands fidgeted with the strap of her purse, the way her laughter came a little too easily. It was all just a little too rehearsed. And when we got home, she tossed her purse on the kitchen counter and quickly went into the bathroom. But my mind was already spinning, and I found myself standing in front of the bag, staring at it like it was a puzzle I needed to solve. I didn't want to go through her things. I didn't want to be the kind of person who violated trust. But the nagging feeling wouldn't let up. Who was the card really for? I asked myself again and again. As I hesitated, I caught a glimpse of the card in my hand. It was an anniversary card. Her anniversary. I ran my thumb over the embossed lettering, and for a moment, I allowed myself to feel the weight of it. It was the kind of card you gave to someone you were in love with. It was personal, intimate, meant for a special person, meant for someone who mattered in a way that no one else could. And yet, it wasn't from me. It wasn't from her husband. I turned the card over, and that's when I saw it, the name on the back. Jackson. The world tilted. The name wasn't familiar. The room felt like it was closing in on me, my breathing becoming shallow, my fingers trembling as I traced the letters of his name. Jackson. Who was Jackson? I could feel the ground beneath me becoming unstable. My head was spinning, my pulse hammering in my ears. My mind raced, running through 1,000 possible scenarios, each more painful than the last. But nothing could have prepared me for what came next. I didn't wait. I couldn't wait. The impulse to know, to find out, was too strong. I had to know. I quietly opened the zipper of her purse, pulling it apart, reaching inside and fumbling through the contents. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding against my chest as I moved things around. Lip balm, a half-empty bottle of perfume, a crumpled receipt, and then, there it was. A small, folded note. I didn't even think. I unfolded it, my eyes scanning the handwritten words quickly. I can't wait to see you tonight. I'm counting the hours until I can hold you again. Forever yours, Jay. The world seemed to collapse around me. The note was everything I feared it would be. The words were intimate, full of longing, full of something I had never seen before. Something I was now certain wasn't meant for me. I couldn't breathe. My mind went blank, my stomach turned to ice. My chest tightened with a mix of disbelief and nausea. How had I not known? How had I been so blind? Suddenly, everything felt wrong. The life I thought I understood, the life I thought we had, was unraveling before my eyes. There had been something going on, something I hadn't seen, something that had been happening right under my nose. The thought of her with someone else, the thought of her betraying me, of lying to me so effortlessly, sent a wave of panic crashing over me. I felt a heat rise in my chest, then a coldness seep into my bones. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to face her. I stood there, paralyzed, the note still clutched tightly in my hand, unable to shake the horror of what I had just uncovered. The woman I had spent my life with, the woman who had shared everything with me, was keeping a secret so deep, so devastating, that it shattered everything I thought I knew. I didn't hear her come out of the bathroom. I didn't hear the sound of her footsteps as she walked into the room, but I felt her presence, and the moment she spoke, my heart stopped again. "What's going on?" she asked softly, but I could hear the tension in her voice. I turned around slowly, the card and the note now out in the open. I didn't have to say anything. She knew. The look in her eyes said it all. The truth was out. And it was the kind of truth I didn't want to believe. The silence between us felt suffocating, thick with unspoken words. She stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. For a moment, I just stared at her, unsure of what to say, unsure of how to begin the conversation that would change everything. It wasn't until I saw her glance at the note in my hand that the dam broke. She inhaled sharply, her body going rigid, like she was trying to prepare herself for the storm that was about to come. But she didn't say anything, didn't even move. I should have been angry. I should have shouted, demanded answers, made her own up to what I knew was true. But the pain, the shock, the betrayal, it was too much. My mind felt like it was shattering into a million pieces. I couldn't form the words. I couldn't ask the question that had been burning in my throat. She was the first to speak, her voice trembling, barely a whisper. I didn't think you'd find out like this," she said, her eyes fixed on the floor. There was no defense in her words, no denial. Just a quiet acceptance, like she knew the truth would eventually surface, but had hoped it never would. I felt sick. My stomach turned, the nausea growing stronger with every passing second. The card, the note, the realization that everything I thought I knew was a lie, it was too much to process at once. How long had this been going on? How long had she been lying to me? And how could she stand there, looking at me with such hollow eyes, when everything between us was falling apart? I opened my mouth, but no words came out. I felt my chest tighten, my heart pounding violently as I tried to steady my breath. My mind was reeling with 1,000 questions, but none of them seemed to matter in that moment. The only thing that mattered was the fact that she had been hiding something from me, something big. Something that made me question everything about our relationship, everything about who she really was. "Who's Jackson?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely above a rasp. It felt like the words were ripped from me, as though speaking them would somehow make it all more real. She winced at the name, and I could see the flash of guilt in her eyes. But it wasn't just guilt. It was fear. Fear that I might leave. Fear that I might never look at her the same way again. He's someone I've been seeing," she confessed, her words soft but unambiguous. "I never meant for it to happen. It just did." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Someone I've been seeing." The words echoed in my mind, each one like a hammer to my chest. I had suspected, sure. There had been small signs, fleeting moments when I thought something wasn't right. But I never imagined it would be like this. I never imagined it would be someone else. Not like this. For a long moment, I just stared at her, unable to process what I was hearing. My mind was working overtime, trying to piece together the fragments of what had been our life, trying to understand how everything had slipped away from me without me even noticing. "You've been seeing him behind my back?" I finally asked, my voice shaking with the weight of the question. It felt like it was tearing me apart to say it, but I needed to know. I needed the truth. She nodded slowly, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you. I never thought it would go this far. I thought I could stop, but then, it was too late." I could feel the tears welling up in my own eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I refused to show her how deeply this was cutting me. I had to stay composed. I had to stay strong, even though everything in me wanted to crumble. You think that makes it better? I demanded, my voice rising slightly. You think an apology makes this okay? How long? How long has this been going on? She shook her head, her hand reaching for her face as though trying to wipe away the pain. A few months, she admitted, barely above a whisper. It started innocently enough. We met at work, and at first, it was just a friendship. But then, it wasn't. It became more. And I didn't know how to stop. A few months. That was it. The time I had spent blind to the truth, while she was out there with someone else, sharing the kind of moments we were supposed to share. My stomach twisted as the realization sank in. Everything we had built together, the years, the trust, the memories, was crumbling right in front of me. And for what? For what did she throw it all away? I couldn't process it. I couldn't understand how she could betray me so completely, so effortlessly. She had kept up the charade for months, lying to my face, pretending everything was fine when she was living a double life. I had believed in her, in us, and she had shattered that belief like it meant nothing. I didn't want to lose you, she said, her voice desperate now, as though she was grasping at any shred of redemption she could find. I never meant for it to happen. I thought I could end it. I tried, but I couldn't. I was scared of being alone. I didn't know how to respond to that. Scared of being alone? Was that her excuse? Was that why she had thrown away everything we had for someone else? I don't even know who you are anymore, I said, my voice hoarse with emotion. It was the truth. I didn't recognize her in that moment. The woman standing before me wasn't the one I had married, wasn't the woman I thought I knew. I'm sorry. I didn't know how to fix it, she said, her voice breaking now as the tears finally spilled over. I was confused, and I made a huge mistake. Please, can we try to work through this? I shook my head, my thoughts a jumbled mess. I didn't know what to think. I didn't know if I could ever trust her again, if I could ever look at her the same way. How could I? How could I ever go back to the way things were when everything had been built on lies? The air in the room felt heavy, thick with regret and sorrow. I knew she was sorry. But her apologies didn't change the fact that everything between us had been broken beyond repair. There were no more words, no more reassurances that would fix this. And in that moment, I realized that the love I thought we shared had already been replaced by something else. Something I could never have imagined, something that had been hidden in plain sight. We stood there in silence, the weight of the truth settling in between us, both of us shattered in different ways, unable to take back what had already been done. And I knew, without a doubt, that nothing would ever be the same again. The days that followed felt like a blur, a haze of emotions I couldn't quite name. The shock of it all had worn off, but what replaced it was a quiet emptiness, a hollow feeling that lingered in the pit of my stomach. I couldn't even remember the last time I had slept, or if I had eaten properly. The world around me felt distant, like I was moving through it as though underwater, everything muffled, everything slowed down. The conversation that night had been more than painful. It had been like pulling teeth, each word spoken, each truth revealed, felt like a piece of me was being stripped away. I could still hear her pleading voice, hear her apology over and over in my head. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. But no matter how many times she said it, it didn't matter. I didn't feel her sincerity anymore. I didn't feel her at all. The next morning, I woke up in our bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember what it was like before everything changed. Before the secrets. Before the lies. I turned to my side, but she wasn't there. Of course, she wasn't. She'd been gone for hours already. I knew where she had gone to him, to Jackson. That thought struck me like a physical blow. My chest tightened, my heart squeezing in pain. How could she leave so easily, so casually, like nothing had happened between us? I tried not to let it bother me, but it was impossible. It was like every fiber of my being was screaming for answers, demanding to know how she could have discarded our life together so thoughtlessly. I lay in bed for hours, staring out the window, watching the world pass by without me. She was with him now. Maybe she had already packed her things. Maybe by now, she had moved on entirely, leaving me in the wake of our shattered love. And still, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, the way she had looked when I'd confronted her about the card. The way she had cried, the way her eyes had filled with shame, as if she knew there was no coming back from what she had done. It was like she had already checked out emotionally before she had even confessed. She had already made her choice. It felt like betrayal was etched in every corner of the apartment. The little things I had overlooked before now seemed to scream at me. The empty space in the kitchen where we used to sit and have coffee together. The pillow on her side of the bed, still perfectly arranged, as if it hadn't been disturbed. Her perfume still lingered in the air, like a ghost that wouldn't leave. I tried to focus on the tasks in front of me, work, the errands, the things that should have been routine, but my mind was elsewhere, always elsewhere. It was like a cloud of doubt and confusion hung over everything. My hands moved mechanically, but I couldn't shake the feeling that my entire life had been built on a lie. The trust, the vows, the promises we had made. All of it had been meaningless. And what was worse, what hurt the most, was that I had believed in it so completely. The next few days were a silent kind of agony. We barely spoke, though she was still around, still coming and going as though nothing had changed. She had stopped trying to explain herself after that first night. I could see it in her eyes, the way she looked at me with something I couldn't name. It wasn't regret or guilt. It was pity. Pity for the man who had trusted her. Pity for the man whose life she had destroyed. I felt like I was losing myself. Like I was slowly slipping away from the person I used to be, the person who had been sure of everything, who had loved so fiercely and without hesitation. Now, I was just empty. I couldn't bring myself to be angry at her. I couldn't even bring myself to confront her again. It was as if the anger had burned out of me, leaving only an aching void where something beautiful used to live. I was a stranger to myself now. I didn't know how to move forward. I didn't know if I should try to fix it, try to salvage what was left of us, or if I should walk away and never look back. I wasn't sure if I was even capable of forgiveness anymore. It was the small moments that hurt the most. The absence of her touch when I reached out for her in the middle of the night. The silence at the dinner table when we would usually share stories about our day. The empty space in the bed that should have been filled with her warmth. I began to stay out longer, to walk the streets late at night just to avoid the ache of home. I couldn't bear to face the empty rooms, the echo of what we used to have. Each step away from the apartment felt like a small act of defiance. Maybe I was running away from her, maybe I was running away from myself. But I couldn't stand the thought of being trapped inside those walls, surrounded by the remnants of a love that had been twisted into something I didn't recognize. One night, I didn't come home at all. I went out with a few friends, trying to drown the thoughts that never seemed to leave my head. They didn't know what had happened. I hadn't told them yet. I hadn't been ready to let anyone in, to let anyone see how badly I was hurting. They tried to keep things light, trying to get me to smile, to forget about it all, but I couldn't. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about Jackson, about the way she had betrayed me. The words "I'm sorry" echoed in my mind over and over again, and they didn't mean anything. They didn't take away the pain. When I got home that night, she was sitting on the couch, waiting for me. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying. She hadn't been crying for me. She had been crying for herself, for the mess she had made. I didn't know if I could stand to look at her anymore. "I'm sorry," she whispered again, her voice trembling. "I know I've hurt you. I don't know how to fix it, but please, I want to try." But I was already tired of hearing apologies. I was already tired of pretending everything was fine. What could she possibly say that would make me believe her again? What could she possibly do to make me trust her after everything that had happened? "You've already broken everything," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. "You've already broken me." And I realized, in that moment, that no matter how much I wanted to fix things, no matter how much I wanted to believe that we could somehow get back to where we once were, the truth was, we couldn't. Everything had changed. The person I thought I knew, the person I had loved, was gone. And no apology, no gesture, no amount of time could undo what had been done. I wasn't sure what the future held. I wasn't sure if there was a way forward for me, for us. But one thing was certain, I couldn't go back. I couldn't know the truth. And I couldn't live in the shadows of a life that had been built on lies. It's funny how, in the wake of devastation, life still continues, almost mocking you with its persistence. The sun still rises, the birds still sing, and people still go about their daily lives. It's as if the world around you has no understanding of the weight you're carrying. But I wasn't part of that world anymore. I felt like a ghost walking through a place I no longer recognized. Everything felt like it was moving on without me, leaving me stuck in the moment where everything shattered. I spent the next week, or maybe it was 2 weeks, I lost track of time, trying to figure out what to do. I avoided her as much as I could, not because I hated her, but because I wasn't sure how to deal with the quiet aftermath. Every interaction, every word between us was strained. It felt like we were strangers, trying to navigate a house that had once felt like home but now seemed foreign, cold. She still tried to apologize, still reached out with small gestures, like making my favorite coffee in the mornings or leaving notes on the kitchen counter, telling me how much she regretted what had happened. But it didn't matter anymore. The damage had already been done. One evening, as I walked back into the apartment after another aimless evening out, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, the light from above casting a soft glow on her face. Her eyes were red, like she had been crying again. She wasn't a stranger to me, but in that moment, it felt like she was. The woman I had once shared everything with, my hopes, my dreams, my fears, was now someone I didn't know, someone I couldn't trust. "I don't know what to do anymore," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I don't know how to make this right. I never wanted to hurt you." I stared at her for a long time, the silence between us heavier than I'd ever imagined it could be. What could I say? What could fix this? How could anything fix what had been broken? The love, the trust, it felt irreparably damaged. I could feel my heart telling me to walk away, to end this before it hurt any more than it already had. But there was something inside me, a tiny flicker of something fragile, that couldn't quite let go. I sat down across from her. "You've already said that. Over and over. And I don't know if I can keep hearing it. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to trust me again. I don't even know if I can fix this, but I want to try," she said softly, her gaze meeting mine for the first time in what felt like forever. It was hard to look at her, harder still to find the words to respond. I was torn. A part of me wanted to scream at her, to tell her how much she'd hurt me, to remind her that everything I thought I knew about us had been a lie. But another part, the part that still clung to the memories of better days, wanted to believe in the possibility of forgiveness. I didn't know if I could forgive her, but I couldn't ignore the way she was looking at me, the way her eyes seemed to be pleading for a second chance. "You've shattered me," I said quietly, my voice filled with the weight of the truth. "You took everything we had and threw it away without a second thought. And I don't know if I can ever trust you again." "I know," she whispered. "I know I've ruined everything. But I still love you. And I don't want to lose you." There it was. Love. The very thing that had once made everything feel possible, that had brought us together, was now the thing that hurt the most. She loved me. But it wasn't enough. It hadn't been enough to keep her from crossing the line with Jackson. And now, I wasn't sure what to do with that love. Was it real? Could love survive the kind of betrayal we'd experienced? "I don't know if love is enough anymore," I said, my voice breaking. "I don't know if I can look at you the same way after everything you've done." She looked at me with a quiet desperation, her hand reaching across the table, as if she could somehow pull me back to her. But I couldn't reach for her, not yet. I needed space, time to figure out what I wanted. Could I really forgive her? Could I really go back to the way things were? Or was this the end of everything we had built? "I'm not asking you to forgive me right away," she said. "I'm asking for a chance to try, to show you that I can change, that I can make it right. I just need you to let me try." And I found myself torn. Because despite everything, despite the heartbreak, there was still a part of me that didn't want to let go. There was a part of me that still believed in us, in what we had once shared. The love was still there, buried beneath the pain, beneath the lies, beneath the hurt. But could love alone heal this wound? Could I look at her again and not see Jackson's face, not feel the sting of betrayal with every glance? "Do you think you can fix this?" I asked, my voice soft, almost as if I was talking to myself. "Do you think there's even a chance we can go back to how things were?" She sat back in her chair, her eyes searching mine, trying to find the answer that I didn't even know. "I don't know," she admitted. "But I want to try. For us. For what we were. For what we could still be." I could feel the weight of her words, the sincerity in them, but I also felt the fear that had taken root deep in my chest. Could I really trust her again? Could I ever let go of the image of her with someone else? The thought of her with Jackson still haunted me, still filled my mind at odd moments. How could I forget it? How could I pretend that it hadn't happened? "Maybe we need time," I said, finally. "Maybe we need space to figure out who we are now, without all the memories clouding everything." She nodded, her eyes filled with tears again. "I'll give you all the time you need. I'll do whatever it takes. But please, don't give up on us. Not yet." And there it was. The fragile hope that had been hidden beneath the layers of pain. I wasn't sure if it was enough. I wasn't sure if we could rebuild what had been broken. But maybe, just maybe, there was a chance. A small, fragile chance that things could be different. A chance that love could heal even the deepest wounds. I stood up from the table and walked to the window, staring out into the night. The world outside was still, peaceful, untouched by the chaos inside my heart. But for the first time in a long while, I felt something stir within me. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was the possibility of it. The possibility of a future that didn't have to be defined by the past. Maybe it was worth trying. Maybe it was worth the pain. Maybe love, if given the chance, could rebuild what was lost. And maybe, just maybe, we could find a way back to each other. It's strange, really, how time has a way of shifting things, blurring edges, softening sharp lines. Some days, I'd wake up, and for a split second, it felt like everything was as it used to be. I'd roll over to see her there beside me, her breath steady and calm, the way it used to be when we had shared everything. But then the fog would clear, and the truth would hit me again like a cold wave crashing against the shore. Nothing was the same. That week, the one that followed our conversation, the one where she promised she would try, where she asked for space, where everything seemed suspended between hope and despair, was filled with silence. It wasn't a heavy silence, the kind that presses on your chest and makes you feel suffocated. It was the kind of silence that leaves you with too much room to think, too much time to wonder if you could ever find peace again. It was a silence that made you realize just how much had been lost. I spent days wandering through the motions, trying to push the thoughts out of my mind, trying to act like I was fine. But I wasn't fine. How could I be? Everything felt shattered, every corner of our apartment, our lives, was now tainted by the memory of the betrayal. The space between us felt wider than ever, like an invisible gap that neither of us could cross. We shared the same air, the same space, but we were worlds apart. She tried. I'll give her that. She really did. She did the small things, making me dinner, leaving notes for me in places I would find them. Her words were softer now, almost like a whisper. Her eyes, those same eyes that once held so much trust, now held uncertainty. It was like she was waiting for me to make the next move, waiting for me to either forgive her or walk away. But how could I make that choice? How could I decide what to do when I wasn't even sure of what I wanted anymore? One night, after dinner, I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't stand the quiet, the tension that filled every inch of the room. It felt like I was suffocating, and I needed to say something. Anything. I needed to talk, really talk, about what had happened, about what we had become. Do you even remember who we were before all of this? I asked, the words slipping out before I could stop them. She looked at me, her expression a mixture of sadness and regret. I try, she whispered. I try to remember, but it's hard. Everything's different now. Yeah, everything's different now, I echoed, my voice heavy. You're right. I don't even know who I am anymore. Her gaze dropped to her hands, and for a moment, I could see the weight of what had happened settle on her shoulders. I never meant for it to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. I don't even know how it got to this point. But I don't want to lose you. I love you. The words hung in the air between us like a fragile thread, waiting to snap. I don't know what to do with that anymore, I said, my voice breaking. I love you too. But that doesn't fix what happened. That doesn't change what you did. And I don't know if I can ever go back to who we were. It was the truth. I wanted to believe in love, to believe that we could somehow salvage something from the wreckage, but I couldn't ignore the reality of it. The truth of what had been broken was too raw, too painful. Love wasn't enough to erase what had been done. And in that moment, I realized that I had been holding on to something that wasn't real anymore. I'm not asking you to forget, she said, her voice trembling. I'm just asking for a chance. A chance to make it right. A chance for you to decide if you still want me. It was hard to breathe. The air around us felt thick, charged with everything we were both too afraid to say. She was right. She wasn't asking me to forgive her immediately. She wasn't asking for me to pretend nothing had happened. She was asking for a chance, just a sliver of hope, to prove that she could fix it. But how could I give her that chance when everything in me screamed to walk away, to protect myself from further hurt? I don't know if I can give you that, I said, my voice quieter now, more resigned. I don't know if I can keep putting myself through this. It's too much. Her face fell, and I could see the tears beginning to form, but I couldn't let that change what I felt. I couldn't let my love for her cloud the truth that had been staring me in the face. I don't want to hurt you anymore, she whispered. I just want you to be happy. I closed my eyes, fighting the pull of the emotions rising inside me. I couldn't look at her anymore. I needed to think. I needed to feel something other than the numbness that had settled in my chest. I can't be happy like this, I said softly. I can't pretend everything's okay when it's not. I need space. I need time to figure out what I want. She nodded, tears slipping down her face, but she didn't say anything. She just let me have my space. She understood, maybe for the first time, that there was no quick fix. She couldn't undo what had happened, and neither could I. We were both left standing in the wreckage of what used to be, unable to find the way back. That night, I went to bed alone, the silence between us thicker than ever. I wasn't sure where we went from here. I wasn't sure if there was a future for us or if this was the end. But one thing I was certain of, I couldn't keep pretending. I couldn't keep living in this place where nothing was real anymore. I knew I needed to make a decision. And soon. But that decision wasn't going to be easy. It would take time. It would take healing. And whether that meant walking away or finding a way to rebuild from the ashes, I didn't know yet. But for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel something other than anger or sadness. I allowed myself to feel hope. A fragile, tentative hope that maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to move forward, either alone or with her. But I would need to face the truth, no matter how painful it was, and decide what I was willing to fight for. And for once, I wasn't going to let the fear of being hurt stop me from finding my peace. No matter what that peace looked like. This was the reckoning. A moment where the past and the future collided, and the only thing that remained was the choice of what to do with the pieces left behind.